Since we don't want to get caught, we plan ahead, are we crazy or what? We plan ahead, are we crazy or what?
Alright, hi, I'm Josh from Self Reliant School, and today I'm going to plant my first crop. Now you probably heard me say that in the second video, and some of you might be wondering, what do you mean by first crop and second crop? Well, depending on where you live and what the weather's like in the year, you have about 2 to 3 crops or 2 to 3 times you can plant. So here in Texas, we can plant in the early spring. Right now, we can plant in the summer, and then we can plant in the fall. So right now, it's spring, so there's still a little bit of a chance of a frost. So I can't plant plants that can't take a frost. So like tomatoes, eggplants, okra, those are all crops you would plant in the summer because they can't take a frost. However, greens like kale, lettuce, and broccoli, they can take a frost. So those are the plants that I'll be planting right now. I'm also going to use our herb garden, and there are some herbs that need a lot of sun and can't take a frost, although there are also some herbs like some sage and some thyme and some rosemary. Those plants, they can take a frost, so those are the kinds of herbs that I'll be planting in our herb garden. So I just want to talk for a minute about how I water our garden. This is for both of our gardens, actually. For this garden, we use just a soaker hose. It's just a soaker hose that runs back and forth between these stones. Just runs back and forth, and then we have a hose that connects to a faucet. And so, depending on the time of year, we'll turn it on, once a day, maybe once every other day for about 20 minutes, just to thoroughly soak the ground. And for our herb garden's pretty small to have a soaker hose, because the stakes and then the soaker hose going back and forth, that would take up a lot of room in our small herb garden. So for that one, I just use a hose with a nozzle on it. So I'll come out here whenever I turn this on, and I'll water that for a minute. And that's how I water both of our gardens. So another thing you have to decide when you plant is where to put your plants, obviously, in your garden. Well, greens, I don't really have to use the trellises because they're not vines, so they don't grow on trellises. But for deciding where I'm going to plant everything, the soaker hose here actually sort of splits up the garden into about 8 individual squares. And so I have about 9 different green kinds of greens that I'll plant. So I'll probably plant 2 in one square, and then I'll have 1 in each of the others. And for the herb garden, I think for the herb garden I'm going to have about the same number of herbs that I want to plant, maybe a little bit less. And so I'm gonna split it down into rows, and I'll just plant each herb in each row, and I'll show you that when I plant the herb garden. And if you'll notice, I haven't picked up all the leaves. There's still a few vines left from when I tore up the honeysuckle, so I may get the big ones out, but I'm not gonna take out the leaves because they act as a mulch, and they'll decompose and they'll become fertilizer for our plants. And also it's just less work. And like I said, I don't till our gardens because that brings all the weed seeds up, and then you have to weed again, so I don't do that. And I also don't clean out the leaves, so that's why I haven't cleaned out the leaves. And there's still a few weeds over here that may have popped up recently, so I'll also get those. I'm gonna plant my spinach. Next is broccoli. found this. I thought it was a weed at first, but this is actually a bean. I'm not entirely sure how it got there, but I guess I will plant it in the back where the trellises, where the back trellises is. And the reason I can tell is because it has these two. They're not really leaves. These are its true leaves. These are they're like leaves, but they're not quite leaves. They look like two halves of a bean, and so that's how I know it's a bean. I planted beans last year, so it may have been left over from one of those. So I'll plant it, and we'll see what happens. So next up is kale. Brussels sprouts. Next up is cabbage. Next up, I have some Swiss chard here. Right in this area. So I planted all my seeds in the main garden. I know it's not pretty, but they still should come up. And so now I just have to water it, and then we'll see if they can come up. And then I'll go plant the herb garden. Okay, so now I'm going to plant our herb garden. I have some herbs here that can take a frost and don't need a whole lot of sun, so they should do all right here since this area doesn't get a whole lot of sun. As to what herbs I have some sage, I have some lavender, I have some cilantro, I have some parsley, some lemon balm, and some rosemary. So I'm going to plant them, I think, in rows. In the main garden, I chose to do it in squares, but I think since this garden is a little smaller, I'm going to plant it in rows. As to how I water this garden, the main garden, like I showed you, I have a soaker hose running back and forth. I think it's a little too small. This one I think is a little too small to have a soaker hose running back and forth. So I just have a hose back there. I don't know if you can see it, but it just has a nozzle on it, so I can just spray this whenever I come out and turn on our soaker hose. So now I'm going to plant our seeds. So here we go. Along with the seeds, I also have a rosemary plant that is already established in a pot, and I'm just going to transplant it right here. Okay, so it's been about a week since I planted our seeds, and as you can see, most of them have started to come up. This is, I believe, the Swiss chard. This is the kale, I think, if I remember correctly. The spinach is over there, and cabbage is coming up. Lettuce is coming up back there, and Brussels sprouts are coming back over there, or coming up back over there. And just to talk about watering a little bit more, since I planted these about a week ago, it might have been over a week ago, a little bit over a week ago, and I've only watered this about 3 times since then. It's really the first 3 days just to keep the soil moist until they sprout. It's been raining pretty often here in Texas, so I haven't really had to water. And when you have seeds, you want to keep the ground pretty moist so they can sprout, but once they start coming up, you can start to back off on the watering, and once they become fully established, you can start backing off on the watering, because they won't need quite as much water when they get bigger. Now there's a few weeds that have popped up here and there, so I just come out here and weed it whenever I get the chance. And I've noticed over the past few days that some of the greens have some holes in them where bugs have gotten them. And you know, with lettuce that's gonna happen a little bit because bugs like to eat lettuce. But if it happens too much, I may spray some organic pesticides on them to keep the bugs off so they don't eat our lettuce. Also, when you plant a bunch of seeds like I did, you'll probably get bunches like this right here. Here there's like at least 4 or 5 Swiss chard plants, and they're very close together. And if they're very close together like that, what you'll probably have to do, or what you need to do, is you'll have to pick the strongest one or the biggest one and cut all the other ones. My mom hates doing that because she hates to kill plants. I don't really like doing it either, but if you don't do it, they'll probably choke each other out and then none of them will survive. So unfortunately, you do have to cut the smaller ones so that the bigger ones can live. I also noticed when I came out here that the ground had been disturbed, and that's usually the sign of a cat, usually a cat. And we have a cat, and we let her outside to roam around in the summer when it's warmer. Because she can take care of the mice and the rabbits, but she can also come in here and sometimes dig around. So I had a gate on here last year. It was just a wooden frame with some chicken wire over it, but it sort of fell apart over the winter. So I have some more staples. I'm going to redo the chicken wire and hopefully repair it so I can put it back on here. And I'll show you how I do that. Alright, so I don't know if you can see them, but if you'll notice here, our pineapple guava bush has some blooms on it. And this bush is self-pollinating, meaning that we don't have to have 2 of them to be able to produce fruit. But we've never actually gotten fruit from it. So one of the things I've heard that is a good thing to do that'll help the fruit production is to take a paintbrush and just go around and sort of touch it, or just sort of brush it against one flower and then go to the next and go to the next and go to the next one. So that will help pollinate it, and hopefully we'll get some fruit from this bush. Careful not to step on, and I have to be careful not to step on our spinach. And so I just sort of brush it against this one, brush it against that one. against this one, against this one. Okay, so now I'm going to try and rebuild our gate, and it's just 4 wooden pieces nailed together with a little bit of wood glue, and this is some chicken wire that we had. We didn't have any staples last year, so I just took some twine and tied it around the chicken wire and the wood, and it actually worked pretty well. It held the chicken wire pretty well, but we got some more staples here and a staple gun. So I'm gonna try and staple it on. I'm gonna see if I can. The wood has also come apart here, and this one's all right. That one's pretty good. At these 2 corners. So I'm gonna try and see if I can hammer it back in, or I might shoot another nail or 2 into it. So here we go. Alright, so this should hopefully keep our cat out and hopefully some of the rabbits. I hope you enjoyed seeing how I plant and how I repair our fence, and seeing some of our greens start to come up. In the next video, I will show you how I start composting. So I'll see you in the next video.